So we're taking a little break, and now we're on chapter 29 of Wonders of Spiritual Unfoldment.
Huh?
John's book.
Yes.
And John, look I highlighted big
Hooray, good
bold.
sign.
I couldn't even get beyond the title. Beyond,
Yes,
one comes to rest.
yes,
We could talk about that for an hour.
we could indeed.
Please share. Beyond, one comes to rest.
uh, uh, well, I'm sure I've said it so many times before, but I keep coming back. It's actually dark now on a late October night, and then I sit here and look out of my window. There's just a blackness. I never draw the curtains, by the way. I like to look out on the night. Well, whatever the world is, however disturbing and restless the world is, and one's own mind, I find it's a marvelous thing just to look out of the window. If you're outside, just look up at the sky, because even on a stormy day with the clouds being blown across the sky, if you get odd glimpses, you can see the sky beyond. And the further you go into the sky, the more deeply at rest it seems, doesn't it? It's just unmoving. The clouds, and then down below the world is moving, the wind is blowing, but up there it's still. It's rest at rest. So there we are, simple as that. And conversely, the other way, going down into the earth, well, the blessed earth is at rest, isn't it? And on the gravestone, many people put at rest, exactly. Beyond this few hurried years of life, hurried and what worried years of life, we come to rest, don't we? And and even a third way in which we may find rest is if we practice meditation, which is really just a rather contrived way of looking at the sky within oneself, finding the beyond within oneself, beyond one's thoughts. And the whole practice of meditation is like really a method of just going through the confusion of the mind to the rest which is beyond it. It's simple, really, once you get the knack.
I'm not sure how simple it really is, but in this chapter, you write a lot about being spirit, and you also write a lot about beyond thinkingness and beyond the mind.
Yes.
And it's a concept mentally. I mean, for myself, I understand, but to really gain the experience of that, would you say that has come out of years and years of your meditation practice?
Well, yes, but dear, you know as well as I do, you've got dogs, you like to go out for walks. It's dead simple. I keep telling you, you go outside and you look at trees and grass, and you watch your dogs playing, and then you're there under the open sky, and you forget to think, don't you? You leave your thoughts behind. You're more interested in nature around you. So your mind comes to rest. So there you are, beyond your thinking, which is just as simple as that. You just turn your attention out into something else. we carry this little bucket full of thoughts around with us, but they're not really very big compared to the world outside. And all we've got to do really is just look there. If you're more interested in your dogs than you are about your own thoughts, then you forget to think, don't you? And when you forget to think, you just stop thinking. Beyond, you come to rest. It's as simple as that. Honest it is. Honest and true. You actually know it as well as I do. But in a funny way, you get into a complicated subject like Wonders of Spiritual Unfoldment, and you somehow think that it's something more than just pure common sense. It's become something complicated, and only special people can do it. I think most people are far closer to God than they think they are. We just think we're not. And you think that clever people, gurus and that, and spiritual people are somehow people who go to church, or people who don't go to church but sit cross-legged and meditate, are somehow closer to God than ordinary people. I'm not at all sure that's actually true. I suspect some of the most ordinary and unpretentious people in the world are probably also most naturally close to God. Yeah, I've just been away to a big sort of conference, and a huge number of lovely, very earnest. They make a bit of a performance out of it. They eat pure food and practice, do various yogas and things, and read books and that, and it becomes a bit of a speciality, really, this seeking God. What does Jesus say? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And who are the pure in heart? In my understanding, the pure in heart are the least selfish people like my mother, who just lived for her family. Your unselfishness. I can hardly ever remember my mother saying I, me, or mine. I never thought of her rights, so she just lived to serve. Your unselfishness. Is anybody closer to God than her? I don't think I've ever met anyone closer to God than my mother. Honestly, I'm serious. I think of some of the ordinary working men I've known, farm men, just quiet, mostly rather silent men, just got on with their lives. Never dreamed of calling themselves spiritual. Well, animals naturally close to God. When you go out and look at the deer, or the birds, or the flowers, people who live in that sort of environment, live naturally with nature, they're naturally close to God, aren't you? I don't know so many people now. You've become more complicated, and machines have rather blunted that natural connection, which was so widespread years ago. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. What does it mean to be pure in heart? Well, I'm just repeating what I say because it's worth repeating. as I understand it, the impurity comes from what we call the ego, the separation, that which separates us, I, me, and mine. The root of all unselfishness, the root of selfishness, self-obsessive, self-righteous. This great emphasis on self. Whereas unselfishness is just to forget about it in the service and love of others. Isn't that what Jesus teaches us? Bear one another's burdens. Love one another. Love God first. Secondly, to love one another. When we love, really love, then you forget about yourself, don't you?
Very helpful, John. I was going to have you read a little section, but before we do that, I was highlighting this sentence. When we look at the world, what we really see is our thought. Mm-hmm. Like that really hit home, looking at the world, especially, well, now, or you take any slice of history and you can see what the thinkingness of man does.
Yes. Indeed. Yes, it's extraordinary. Once you begin to understand this, the world becomes quite, well, you understand why the world is what it is and what the world is. And you begin to, I've lived nearly 40 years since I wrote this book. And of course, I've gone on developing all the time. So what I wrote here, when this was just really beginning to come into my mind, my understanding was beginning. I dare to say that 40 years later, I'm getting a bit better at practicing what I then preached, practicing what I then wrote about. I like the old saying, those that can, do, and those that can't, teach. Or I might say, write books.
I love that. That is so truthful. John, do you mind reading the second paragraph on page 257? Because it ties into this beautiful.
Suppose someone tells us an obvious untruth. Do we believe and fight it, giving it attention and thereby existence? Isn't it better to simply ignore it and let it die away? The same options apply when we look at the world from a spiritual point of view. Bodies appear before our mortal eyes, corrupted and divided, whereas spiritual awareness sees a continuum of spirit. Which do we believe?
I think this is a big one. How to not feed into the untruth.
Well, I think I started putting this into practice. Actually, it started many, many years previously. And again, I'm sure I've told this story many times. But I remember particularly, I suppose I was in my I must have been in my 20s, probably towards the end of my 20s, 27, something like that. And I had a lot of sheep then. And I had one particular little sheep sheep are very interesting creatures. There are many, many different varieties of sheep, and you can largely divide them between mountain sheep and lowland sheep, which both behave quite differently. Mountain sheep are very much more independent. They're a bit like goats, they've got their own mind, a little bit naughty. Whereas lowland sheep tend to group together and do the same thing. Anyway, at one time I worked on not a mountain farm, but a hill farm. And I knew the people there, and I went to visit them. They had a couple of orphan lambs in a little shed. And they're orphan lambs, they're ever so sweet, but an awful nuisance because you've got to feed them from a bottle, and they're just perpetually meh, meh, they're never satisfied. And unless you can get rid of them onto a mother sheep who take them, which most of them won't, but sometimes you can trick them into taking them, you're stuck with these little creatures. And so this farmer was only they had to get rid of them. Anyway, I took them. And one of them was a little boy, the other girl. And the little girl, she was a sweetie. I loved her. But she was always different. The other sheep would all do what sheep do, just graze. But she was always up on her hind legs, on the hedge, eating the things that nobody else could reach. And anyway, she was in lamb, and she was not far off bearing her first lamb. Then she decided to die. She lay down by herself up on the sort of top of the field, really. And I used to go and visit her. I did what I could as a young farmer. I tried to, we didn't have many medicines, but a few pretty primitive things. I did what I could. Nothing worked. So she decided to stop and sit with her. And over a period of about a fortnight, she just drifted away. And I'd go up every day and kneel down beside her on the wet earth and just sit with her. And she taught me so much about death. But she was completely unworried about it, as far as I could see. She was completely at peace. She didn't go into misery because of her unborn lamb. She just lay there completely peaceful and just gradually just faded out. And then one morning I went up and she'd gone. Bless her. Well, at that time I was struggling with quite a lot of things in life, as young men are at that age. And she just seemed enviably peaceful. I thought, oh, what a marvellous thing. I wish I could die like that. Why have I got to struggle on in this life for another 70, 80 years? So I rather fell in love with death then. And, farming doesn't have to teach you about death. Something's dying almost every day. If it's not an animal that's dying, the year's dying, the season's dying, the plants and that are dying, and you're engaged in the business of sending them away to the bush or pulling them out of the ground to harvest them or cutting their heads off to sell them, or you're always doing something to do with death. So I really became very confident with death. And then I'd hear people talking. They were so sort of, oh God, so-and-so's died. Oh, it's dreadful. We must save them from, hospitals and ambulances and all the palaver we make about dying. And I sort of thought, oh, goodness me, what's wrong with dying? And so, especially when I began to get these spiritual insights, I sort of used to say to myself when somebody died, well, they don't die. Nobody dies. Nobody's ever died in the real world in spirit. Then what's all the fuss about? I think I do that now instinctively when somebody says, oh, they died. Inwardly, I say, well, they haven't died at all. Of course they haven't. Or somebody's been killed or that. Well, I say, of course they haven't. But nobody's been killed. They just sort of changed houses, as it were. And I start to do that automatically, I think, now. Depends what's in here, isn't it? Either you look out through these eyes of mortality, which of course see mortality, or you look with your spiritual eye, insight, and you know that nobody dies. Sorry, I've wandered off the point a bit, haven't I? I must be a difficult man to interview.
I think you're very much on point because we're talking about the untruth.
Yes. Well, it is untrue. Once you see the truth, it is untrue. And the world is governed, you see, by untruth. As the Bible describes it, the devil, which is the power of darkness or the power of ignorance, is the prince of this world. This world is governed by ignorance or darkness, where the blind lead the blind.
So, John, for those of us that are very much still stuck in the world, I mean, I know it's going beyond and the stillness and the meditation, doing the work. Sorry about my background noise. But do you have any additional advice for those of us that are trying to have an experience around maybe being in the world, but not of the world?
Well, my advice is, I mean, who am I to give advice, my dear? Because life itself is teaching us, isn't it? And there's this thing called divine discontent. And yes, a lot of people like lowland sheep. You know, you're just content to follow the flock and just stay together and do what everybody else does, and just feed on this world. But there's some spirits like that little mountain sheep that want to get up on their hind legs and reach the higher fruits. And so it is that some people don't want to die. And if the motive is strong enough, well, you might start looking to see how you can avoid it. Or if you want to find the love that never says no, or a few other good things that come with spirit, you might make efforts to go in that direction. Otherwise, where are the adventurers? How many will go so far or further or further? But life does teach us, because sooner or later we do lose our beloved. Our house does, things do go wrong in life, and that's usually what prompts people to start thinking, start considering what it's all about. Even on their deathbeds, most people begin to start thinking as they get near the end, if they didn't before. What's it all for? Is there a better way? Is it just a matter of changing the government, or is there more to it? Why aren't we happier than we are?
You know, that's a really good point. And I know you and I have talked about this last time I was in Bakewell, about being really happy, or like the English like to say, jolly.
Yes, yeah.
It's up and down of emotions. What's the point of it all?
I'm a great believer in being unhappy, dears. I think one of the greatest spurs to apply oneself to spiritual work is unhappiness. The more miserable we are, when we have luck, we might be prompted to look for something better. There's nothing like a broken heart when the castle of our dreams lies in fragments at our feet. We might start looking for something more substantial. Life itself really is the teacher. Who am I to offer advice? Just live, my dears, and see what happens. Maybe you'll be called, maybe you won't. God knows. What's the use of me giving you advice if you don't put it into practice? I've rather given up on saying things to people because hardly anybody, people just listen, or they don't listen. It goes in one ear, out of another. How many people put it into practice? I don't know. I suspect very few. They might as well shut up and let people work it out for themselves. People get sort of teacher addicts, don't they? Lots of people become retreat addicts. They go from one retreat to another, spend a lot of money. They can roll off a whole list of gurus they've been to visit in India and all over the place. They've got sort of addicted to it, but whether anything actually sinks in, I'm not so sure, really. Maybe they've been better just to sit at home and use their common sense. Spiritual addicts, a lot of them. Are they nearer God than the rest of us? I rather doubt it. I'm sorry, I'm becoming a bit skeptical in old age, aren't I? I said it before on this, I think with you, Nick, and reputed words of that great soldier, the Duke of Wellington, who said, never give advice to anybody unless you're in a position to see it's carried out. I agree with him.
John, on page 261, I think this is very appropriate to what you just talked about, the last paragraph, and then the first paragraph on page 262. Since you already wrote about all of this, I thought maybe you could read that for us.
Nothing whatever of this world is necessary to spirit. Pure elements, for example, the sky, and for some, religion, may bring us close, but even they are left behind. There's no more need for books or images of any kind, for all is open and revealed. The works of man are past. It's so good to be free. It's simply wonderful. From love, unchanging, attention turns with compassion to the world. It sees events passing like cars along the road, enclosed within themselves, from past to future. What can it do? It writes these words and sends them forth, leaves of eternity upon the paths of time, invitations to pause, to lay down burdens and be free. Suppose you are present here and now with someone else who is not present, but lost in and talking about some thought of his own. You see how the thought gives rise to words, body expressions follow, and the process may be taken into action. This is exactly how we fall from spiritual origin into the world. We call it being born, but actually from spirit, it's death. Our so-called life is this fall into the consequence of thought. As a child, I had a powerful desire to be a farmer. When I grew up, I became a farmer, worked hard, loved my farm and way of life, became thoroughly identified with and attached to it, and then went through a long, painful process of losing it. Now, looking back, I see the whole process from start to finish, from ageless timeless freedom. Certainly the world is beautiful, and our lives may be happy or absolutely dreadful. But from spirit, the whole thing is a repetition of the pattern of being either here, present in spirit, as it actually is, or there in a world of our own imagining. And because spirit is one, each of the myriad lives composing all human history is but one of one's own thoughts going off and doing its own thing. How benevolently now I see it all. Indeed, one holds the whole wide world in hand. I don't always see it as clearly as that, but I must have done on that occasion. Here now, just here and now. It's Thursday evening. On Thursday evening, from the church, the bell ringers practice on Thursday evening. Go through the windows closed, it's cold, wet. I just hear the bells ringing. It's lovely, it's very English. Church bells, very much part of England. And yet, here now, in this stillness, where's the last 86 years of my life gone? Where's my childhood, my young man's dreams, my farm, the places I've been to, girls I've loved? Where is it all? Did not just water under the bridge, washed away. Was it ever as real as it seemed? What is time? How is it that I can see my face on the screen, the face of an old man, and yet inwardly I'm ageless completely, timeless, ageless. And both this old man you can see on the screen and also this one that's talking to you that can describe it from the point of no time at all. Just this eternal presence. Extraordinary, isn't it? Be in the world and yet not of it. And what is this hand that holds the whole wide world? Is this invisible, silent presence? We can demonstrate it like this. It holds the whole of time and space in its hands. Yes, it's as big as that, isn't it? All time, all history, all recorded history, all held in this everlasting moment now. Rather like those bells, echoes of eternity, reminding us of this other dimension to life, which we shall forget about. This call back to God, the Spirit. The church spires, going up to a point, isn't it? The church spire goes up to a point, and then what happens? The point just dissolves into the sky. All the conglomeration of what we call life. It comes to this point, this timeless, spaceless point, and then just dissolves into the ocean of one.
On page 264, John, and how inappropriate now that I'm talking. But since we are interviewing, we can't just do an hour of no talking. I mean, we could. But you write, why is stillness so important? Absolute stillness is absolute surrender, is absolute. Thy will, not mine, is the end of me.
Yes, amen. It is, isn't it? Absolutely. And you're so right, dear. Everywhere, just in silence. But because this is the interview, we feel we have to talk. But it seems so unnecessary, doesn't it, really? Why can't we just stay in silence? We feel compelled to ask a question. What can I add to that? The end of me. It's simple. Just shut up. Stop talking. And rest in that stillness, that silence. Beyond it all, one comes to rest.
Why do you think we struggle so much with stillness? We need to have the TV going or be distracted, so sucked into the world. It's almost like a drug withdrawal when you first bring more and more stillness into your life.
Yes, it takes a little while to get accustomed to it, I think, for many people. I always found it very easy because I was naturally a countryman. I'm used to being alone out in the fields with sheep. I never was much of a talker. I never cared for noise. Some people just need it. Can't live without talking, live without noise, or switching music or something. You're a bit the same as far as I know, aren't you? You also love silence. A lot of people can't cope with it. Some people are actually frightened by it. It's practice, I suppose. I suppose if you really can't approach God that way, then you probably would be a member of the church choir or something and sing your heart out. A lot of people do prefer to find God that way. They never really come to silence. Oh, God bless them. It's perfectly valid. There are many ways to God. I'm not say it has to be silence. Maybe they will come to silence in the end, but I'm not sure. It's the world's temptation is very compulsive, isn't it? We're addicted to the telly or the computer, to words, to talking. I just had a few days companionship with a marvelously quiet person. I thought how lovely it was. Absolutely. I was a chatterbox really, and not that I talk very much, but wonderfully restful. Not many people are like that. I suppose it's the mark of deep friendship if you can, well, again, not for everybody. People like me, the ability to be quiet with someone, very precious. I've got an old-fashioned clock on the wall there. It goes tick-tock, tick-tock. I spend many hours just listening to that. I love that. Sometimes, quite rarely, there's someone sitting in the chair opposite me, not saying anything, just the tick-tock, and it goes on. We can listen to it together.
The second paragraph, John, on page 265. Maybe we could finish with that because it ties into one's own mind and what we just talked about.
One's own mind. One's own mind, with its servant the tongue, is a negative asset when it comes to understanding life as it is. Coming to stillness is a process of purification. The still mind, completely free of thought, is pure and sees purity. In stillness, all impure thoughts associated with me fall away, and the mind returns to its pure and natural function, reflecting the divine. Every time we look at the world with a really still mind, it's as though we've never seen it before. We see it as it actually is, as one and perfect. You know, just this evening, we had a hour and a half's meditation in the church. There was a young lady from Germany with me. We walked down the church path together. It's quite a steep path. Quite a long one, really, through the churchyard, through the old gravestones. And usually I walk down very slowly. We walked down together. I wobble about a bit, so she was holding my hand. And didn't speak. And just not only every footstep, but every stone. It'd been raining, every dampness and reflection of the wet stones, and the grass just slightly waving in the breeze. It was just as though it had never been seen before at the first day of creation. Absolutely miraculous. I must have been walking up and down that path for over a quarter of a century, and yet as though I'd never been there before. Miraculous, isn't it? She was talking about making a sort of video to go with some verses I'd written. I'd been searching on the internet for suitable images and music. I was thinking, really, there's no need to do that because everything you can possibly need is right there beneath our feet. The only one has eyes to see it. What could be more absolutely beautiful than just walking down a very ordinary asphalt path through a churchyard on an autumn evening? Just only that. Pigeon circling over the town for their goose. Thank you for listening. God bless you all.